So I got an invitation from a teeny tiny Christian club at a big secular university in Olympia, Washington. And Olympia, Washington is one of the most secular cities in the country. So this was kind of a daunting little exercise, but I wanted to encourage a small Christian group. So I drove from Seattle, where I was at the time, down to Olympia, and I was gunning it down I-5 because I didn't have much time. It was a lunchtime event, and I was a little late. I whip into a parking lot. I dash into a building. I dash through some doors, and suddenly something over here catches my eye. It's a poster. It's like yay big, and it's my face. And underneath my face are flames, you see. And the theme is, that's not the poster. Anyway, the theme is Come Barbecue the Christian. And there was a whole barbecue theme to this event. In fact, the moment I saw the poster, a guy walks by with a wheelbarrow full of barbecued chicken wings from the best barbecue place in town. The smell was filling the building, drawing all these students in and faculty around the corner into this giant lecture hall. I thought it was going to be 3 or 4 guys. It's this lecture hall, standing room only. And so the organizers say, yeah, sorry to spring this on you at the last second, but we're just going to put you up front and let you answer questions for an hour. And if you do so effectively, we'll just release everybody to go and get the wings. So I guess this is great entertainment on this campus where you get to dismember a Christian intellectually and then celebrate by eating wings, you know. So I'm trying to get my mind around this, and I said, all right, I'll do that. So I gave a quick 1 or 2 minute opening salvo and then said, all right, let's hear your questions. So I've been doing this a while, and the questions have changed over time. They've gotten stupider. I'm not kidding. That might be a little harsh, but it was as if every person in that room had learned all of their theological knowledge from reading the Da Vinci Code. It was kind of pathetic. I had to help them ask better questions. Even the atheist club that was sitting right in front with T-shirts on, you know. Even more pathetic was about halfway through, the questions just completely dried up. Now, these are college students at the prime of their life, searching through, you know, all the big questions. Is there a God? Is there a soul? And to think that their questions would dry up was kind of pathetic. And so, and they had to ask good questions in order to earn the wings. So I wasn't going to let them go anywhere. I'm standing there, man. I'm going to, you know. And so they're not asking anything, and I'm not saying anything. But I'm kind of like RoboCop. I'm scanning, you know, the crowd for any kind of motion, you know. And I see a guy, he's sheepishly raising his hand, you know. And I go, you. He's like, whoa. Mister, do you believe in baptism? Strange question. I said, look, not only do I believe in it, but I've seen it done. And there was this beat, you know, and then the whole place just erupted in laughter. I was so grateful because you could visibly see the shields coming down, you know? It wasn't a game of gotcha anymore. We only had like 10 or 15 minutes left, but for those last few minutes, they were asking like real authentic questions, and we had this interchange. I got a chance to share the gospel, tell them what the Lord has done in my life. And it was just kind of a wonderful last few minutes, you know? But it was over, and they released them for the wings. Oh, they were just tearing each other apart to get to the wings. But clearly there were like a lot of architecture majors or structural engineering majors in the group. The reason I know this is because they gave them little plates, but they were able to build towers of wings, you know, with flying buttresses and drawbridges, you know, the whole thing. Oh my goodness. There was this crazy ending to this whole thing. So the moment the thing is done, this woman stands up in the front row, and she's asking me a personal question. So I'm leaning over here talking to her. And I saw with my peripheral vision, there's this woman coming from the wing table, and she's coming around the bend, you know. She's got her plate of wings, and she's eating one. She's got some schmutz on her face here. And she's coming at me, you know. And I'm leaning over talking, and she leans over me. Hey! You know, hey! You know. And I look up, and there she is, you know. Yes, ma'am, what can I do for you? And she goes, well, here's my thing. My thing is that there aren't enough women in the Bible. You know, like I'm in charge of how many females are in sacred scripture, you know. So I thought for sure she was a plant from the drama department, So I'm kind of messing with her back, You mess with me, I'll mess with you. I'm like, oh, I totally know what you mean. She's like, yeah? I go, yeah. Like, instead of the 3 wise men, should have been the 3 wise women. She's like, yeah. I go, that makes so much more sense because if it were 3 wise women, they would have arrived on time. Yeah. Because women ask for directions, And for goodness sakes, they would have helped deliver the baby, they would have cleaned the stable, and they would have brought practical gifts like a baby blanket, a pacifier, and a casserole, And the woman goes, you know what? You get it. You get it. So, look, whoops. I don't get anything, really. I don't get anything. Well, maybe I get 3 small things. Number 1, life is insane. Number 2, if you can make them laugh, it all goes a little bit better. And number 3, the adventure really takes off if you can fulfill that great command of Peter in 1 Peter 3:15. Be prepared always to give an answer, a reason for the hope that you have, yet do so with humility and respect.
So when I was in my 20s, about the age like a lot of you here tonight, I was this eager beaver screenwriter. I had a job as an assistant at Walt Disney Studios. And Walt Disney, Pixar, yeah. Just finished my first screenplay, just finished my first short film, and I'm like all excited, ready to go. I want to be a filmmaker. I was writing with a writing partner, and one day we went to an after-Oscar party. And as we were leaving, I see this guy walking to his limo, and who is it but Robert De Niro? So I go, Bobby! And he turns, and his eyes kind of narrow, and he looks at me, and with this classic Don Corleone voice, he goes, yeah. I didn't know what that meant, but I was like, you only get one chance in Hollywood. I run up to him, and I say, I'm a new screenwriter. My name is Kendall Tucker, and I want to submit a script to you, and will you read it, please? You guys have heard of speaking in tongues, right? This is the closest thing to it. I'm sure he didn't know what I was saying either. But all I needed was a yes, because, in Hollywood, all you need is one yes. So he goes, in that same classic Don Corleone voice, yeah, have your agent submit it to my office. And I was like, whoa, Robert De Niro, oh my gosh. So my writing partner and I go back, have our agent submit our screenplay and our short film, and about 3 weeks later, we're in our office, we're writing, and all of a sudden, we get this call. We answer the phone, and you can almost guess the voice on the other line says, yeah, this is Robert De Niro, and I loved your movie. Now, wait a minute, guys. Okay, this was one of those moments. Like the moment. I mean, I'm sitting there going, Robert De Niro, the guy who played Don Corleone in The Godfather 2, the one who played Tavis Bickle in Taxi Driver. Oh, you guys are a little young for this, but you looking at me? Remember that line? You looking at me? And he also played Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull. Any of you guys know Raging Bull? Okay, maybe you do know the role he played in Meet the Parents, the crazy see, I know my audience. So yeah, the crazy CIA dad in Meet the Parents, and he liked our movie. Oh my gosh, I was just like, what do we do next? But flash forward a year later, my partner and I sold our first screenplay to Sony Studios with Robert De Niro as the producer. I mean, it was just like overnight. It was like a Cinderella story. I mean, we were flying on Lear jets all of a sudden. We were going to A-list Hollywood parties, red carpet premieres, like, walking the red carpet. That was fun. And all of a sudden, my life had changed overnight. I mean, I was like in screenwriter's heaven. The only problem was, like, I really was not ready for all that success. And truth be told, I was kind of becoming a little diva. I was developing this insatiable hunger for where's the next party? When's the next red carpet premiere? Wanting to get the next deal, wanting to be liked in the business, wanting to be applauded, wanting to be patted on the back. Well, I was really kind of lost at that point, lost in Hollywood. So flash forward 7 years later, and I had sold 6 screenplays to major studios: Universal, Fox, Sony, New Line. But here's the kicker. None of them made it to the theaters. They all got stalled at the studios. So here I was in my early 30s, and I was like a washout, right? I couldn't get a call returned, no more red carpet premieres, no more A-list Hollywood parties. I mean, I said to myself, if I have one more relative who comes up to me and says, "Where can I find your film in Blockbuster?" Well, you guys, okay, Redbox, you know, Redbox, for you guys. "Where can I find your film in Redbox?" I thought I was gonna slip my wrist. I'm like, it's not in Redbox. And truth be told, I was so depressed. I had such a career crisis that this colored girl seriously did consider suicide when the rainbow wasn't enough. But I had no idea then that the collision that I had with the Don Corleone, had everything to do with the collision between my faith and my identity. You see, God was setting me up big time back at that time. I wasn't a Christian. I didn't know God. Hollywood was my God. But God made me collide with the thing that I wanted the most, which was to be a screenwriter, in order for me to become the person that I needed most to be. The person that I am today, a committed Christian, a screenwriter who is rebuilding my writing career, realizing that I didn't necessarily have to be called out of the entertainment industry, because at one point I wanted to completely walk away. But God's given me a vision, no, be salt and light in the entertainment industry. And a teacher who's passionately teaching my students all the secrets I learned while being a writer in Hollywood. Yep, I had no idea then that the collision I had with the Don had everything to do with the collision between my faith and my identity. It was like a rebirth. And it's why I am who I am today. Thank you.
It all started with a $20 bill and some extra change. "That'll be $5.87 at drive-through window number 1, she said. I thought to myself, how am I going to impress this girl at the drive-through window? Window number 1. Now, I couldn't defend my faith against the barbecue the Christian thing. I couldn't write screenplays. What could I do? I'm a math guy. So here was my brilliant plan. This is a story about how my brilliant plan collided with the reality of true life, how there was a collision, not a physical collision, but a collision of expectations. I decided instead of giving my $20 bill, I was going to give her $21.12 instead. Now that may seem confusing at first, and she would take my 20 in my imagination, my $21.12, look at it and say, wait a minute, wasn't the total $5.87? It wouldn't be until she typed it into the cash register that she realized the brilliance of my plan. You see, $21.12 minus $5.87 is exactly $15.25. The change would just be a $10 bill, a $5 bill, and a single quarter. No pennies, no dollar bills, no dimes, all this type of stuff. Furthermore, to emphasize the brilliance of my plan, I slapped down the 20 on the shelf right there, and I said, wait, I've got some change, as if I hadn't already planned it ahead of time to sort of nonchalantly, I just calculated this just now. And the thing about the drive-thrus is when you drive up to that little window, you see into the kitchen, they're frying up some burgers, you see the smell of the fries comes wafting in, the smell of the hamburgers comes wafting in. Well, as the smell wafted into my car, it also wafted my $20 bill off the shelf into the ledge right between my car and the wall right there, gone forever. You see, sometimes in life there are winds that bring us pleasure, but those same winds can bring us pain too. So, was this the lesson that I learned that afternoon at the drive-thru? No, it wasn't. I got out of my car, I was getting ready to get out of my car, but I forgot in my being flustered that I was still in gear in my stick shift car. The car jerks forward, I stomp on the brake before I hit the car in window number 2, and what does she see looking out the window? A person with a brilliant math plan? No. She sees somebody whiplashing towards the car in front of her. I try to get out, but I'm stuck. I physically cannot move. What is wrong? Sometimes in life, when you look at the obstacles in front of you, you have to check and make sure your path is clear. You have to check yourself before you wreck yourself. So was this the life lesson that I learned that day at the drive-thru? No, it wasn't. You see, I couldn't get out of my car. I couldn't move because I'd forgotten my seatbelt was still on. And furthermore, it had locked and tightened in place when I stomped on the brake. So there I am trying to get out. I finally squeezed out and I opened the door. I could barely squeeze out. What does the girl at window number 1 see? A brilliant mathematician? No, she sees me doing a sideways limbo, trying to get out of my car. I'm looking for my $20 bill. It's not there, it's not on the other side. I look under the car, it's nowhere. How could something just disappear? I looked all over the place. Finally, I saw the littlest corner sticking out from under my back left tire. You see, it had flown right in front of the tire, and when I jerked forward, I ran right over it. Sometimes in life, when you're searching for things, you have to keep searching, keep persevering, because what you're looking for may be right in front of you. Is this the life lesson I learned that day? No, it wasn't. I got back in my car, started the car, moved the car, made sure it was in park, turned it off, got out of my car. What did the girl see? Window number 1? She did not see a brilliant mathematician. She saw me zigzagging across the parking lot, running after my $20 bill. That winds of life had blown through the parking lot. And it was at that moment that I realized the lesson that I had learned was this, that I shouldn't try to be impressive by math skills, or I shouldn't find my value in what I do. No, I shouldn't have sat there and tried to come up with a brilliant plan. I shouldn't have tried to use my extra change to be impressive. I shouldn't have tried to use that $20 bill. I should have used 100.
Hi there. Whoa. Have you ever had something happen to you that was so frustrating in the moment and then later on you saw God's handprint all over it? Well, that's what my story is tonight. The year was 1972, right after the earth cooled. Right after. I was a sophomore in high school when I kneeled down in my family room and gave my life and my heart to God. I was thrilled with the choice I had made, but I was also really afraid. And why was I so afraid? Because my choice had put me on a direct collision course with the most important person in my life, my dad, the man who had absolutely no faith and no interest in finding it anywhere ever. Thank you, amen. As I went on over my next 2 years in high school, learning about my faith and growing, my dad and I had several conversations, intense conversations. Okay, lots of arguments. We argued about everything theological. My dad did his best because it was his mission in life. Oh, that's a horrifying picture. That was his mission in life to convince me that I no longer wanted to be a Christian. And it was my mission in life to convince him that I did. My dad was afraid, and why was he so afraid? He was really worried that his sweet little daughter, was going to become what he termed a Jesus freak, and that he would find me someday in San Francisco on a corner on a box screaming at everybody, "Repent now, God is here to kill you if you don't." He was absolutely convinced that would happen. But he wasn't able to convince me to give up my faith. And so by my senior year in high school, I had decided where I wanted to go to college, and it was here, Biola College at the time. All I had to do was tell my parents that I wanted to go. In a fit of naivety that is unmatched in life, I ran home that afternoon in the fall of my senior year in high school, sat down at the dinner table and announced, "Mom and Dad, I know where I want to go to college. It's in Southern California. It's small, it's private, well, it's expensive, and it's Christian." Not quite sure what I thought my dad was going to say that night or what response I was going to get. What I got was absolute silence. Just a lot of chewing as they ate their dinner. Just sort of stared at me and chewed. And I'm sort of sitting there thinking, what the heck is going to happen? My father swallowed, deliberately put his fork down, looked up at me and said, "No." Actually, what he said was, "Hell no." Actually, what he said was a whole lot of other words that I can't really say in the gym at Biola. Just can't. But the bottom line, you guys, was that it was no. I was not going to Biola, discussion done. But being my father's daughter, and I was every inch my father's daughter, I was convinced that if I worked hard enough and I talked long enough that my dad would believe me and change his mind and I could come to Biola. He was equally convinced that he could convince me to go to Stanford. By the time we got to May of my senior year, my mother was totally disgusted with this whole thing. So she suggested my parents take a road trip to Southern California. Check out the school with the ridiculous name, as they called it. And since my dad loved road trips, he loved LA, and my mother mentioned to him that it would probably shut me up, he said, "Okay." And armed with my transcripts and my SAT scores, my parents drove down Highway 5, that's what it was. They drove down Highway 5 to check out this school. And they got a tour. They went to classes, they met professors, and they were impressed. They weren't impressed with the school, the classes, or the professors. What my parents were impressed with is as far as the eye could see across this campus, all they saw was clean-cut guys with short hair and no beards. This was the 70s, friends, when everybody had hair down to here, and my dad said all my friends were hippies. So they saw all these clean-cut kids who could talk in full sentences, and they actually made sense. My parents were thrilled. They went to eat in the calf. They liked it. Amazing, wasn't it? And when they got out after lunch, they went to their car, and lo and behold, they had a flat tire. My dad never was one to call for AAA. He was going to change it himself. So he was in the parking lot behind Sutherland, changing the tire, and that's when the Talbot student came into the story. He was going, I don't know where, but he saw my dad, and he asked if he could help. And my dad, surprisingly, who never took help from anybody, said yes. So the kid changed the tire. When he was done, my dad shook his hand and tried to hand him a $20 bill. He politely refused to take it. My dad politely insisted that he take it. This went on for a while. And finally, the young man said to my dad, you know what? I'll take the $20 bill if you let me give it away to church. And my dad was totally speechless and said, oh my gosh. And actually, he didn't say anything for 10 seconds. And then he said, okay, they got in the car, they came home. My dad said, I don't know why you want to go to that school, but it's okay, you can go. Expletives have been deleted. And I was on my way to Biola, but God wasn't done with my family. Because my dad couldn't forget that guy from Talbot that changed his tire and wouldn't take any money for it. And unbeknownst to everybody in my family, he went to see my pastor and asked him if he could talk with him. He walked into my pastor's office and said, Ralph, never called him pastor, you know this Jesus guy, don't believe in him at all, but I got some questions. And if you're willing to answer them and meet with me, I'm going to ask you tough questions. And I know that this place, this church is full of hypocrites, but you know what? I got some answers I need, so I'm going to come to you. My pastor smiled at him and said, Fred, I'll be happy to answer any of the questions that I can. And by the way, there's always room for one more. My parents met with my pastor for the next few weeks, and I was the most surprised person on the planet in December when my parents called me to let me know that they were going to give me an extra Christmas present that year, a plane ticket up to the Bay Area in January so I could sit in the front row of my church and watch both of my parents be baptized. A frustrating event, a flat tire, the handprint of God, a young Talbot student who probably really could have used that $20, but instead knew that it was more important to serve. The result, 3.5 years after my dad stood in that parking lot with him, on the day that he went home to be with Jesus, he looked at me and he said, I love you and I'll see you there. And you know what? Because of that flat tire and that Talbot student, I will.
Hi, my name's Miranda Paul, and my best friend is Holly Baca. I have known Holly Baca since I was 10 years old. I met her on the first day of 6th grade. When we first met, we had a mutual bond because we both liked to overachieve in school and had dorky senses of humor. We went to school in a small private school in my hometown of Albuquerque, New Mexico. There was maybe about 18 kids in our classes, and we connected right away and we became really fast friends. And we were the kind of best friends to where we would spend the night at each other's houses every Friday night, and we would call each other on the phone after school before texting was cool. And we had a great friendship, and it was going super smooth until we got into high school. And during my freshman and sophomore year, it started to change a little bit, and we started to fight a lot more, and there was a lot of tension in our relationship. There was a lot of causes behind our tension. One of them being typical high school drama, the other being miscommunication, and the third being religious tension. Holly was raised as a very strong Catholic, and I was raised as a very strong, non-denominational, charismatic Protestant. While Holly was raised to go to catechism, I was raised to speak in tongues at a very young age, as a very completely different world. Our differences, though, were never a problem until we were about 15, and we went through this period where we both were trying to figure out our own faith, but we had an inability to understand the others. I remember one particular day we were in art class, and we were supposed to be working on a project in the side room, and instead we started talking about what we believed. And I started to defensively ask a lot of questions. I started asking, what is the Eucharist? What is purgatory? Why do you pray to the saints? And do you think I'm sinning because I don't go to confession every week? Holly responded with vague answers because she was 15 and couldn't explain it all, and she was very frustrated at my aggressiveness. I remember I was really mad the next day because I felt like we were trying to convert each other, and so I bluntly told her that the day I'd become a Catholic is the day that she'd become a Protestant, and that wasn't anytime soon. Flash forward to our junior year, we started fighting too much, and so we stopped talking. And we went to such a small school that we had to see each other every day, and every day that we saw each other, there was bitterness and resentment and hurt. By the grace of God, by my senior year, we became friends again, and as we entered college, we became even closer than before. Holly goes to college in Ohio, and I'm here, and although the distance between us is pretty great, we always get to come home together during the summers and spend time together. This past summer was great. We spent every week swing dancing, and we used to go on morning walks for coffee alongside the river that runs through Albuquerque. And on one of these particular walks, we decided to reopen this conversation that was so explosive before, only we had it much better than the first time. We were able to map out the differences between Catholicism and Protestantism, but we were very respectful, and we debated and we acknowledged the differences, but we decided that it was okay. The highlight for me from the conversation was that rather than focusing on all of our differences, we came to this place where we both admitted that we just truly loved God more than anything else, and that if that was always the number one, then nothing else mattered. Especially none of the differences that we fought over so much before. Holly is one of the best people in my life. She has wept with me when I'm at my worst, and she has celebrated with me when I'm at my best. She challenges me, she loves me, and she didn't give up on me, even when I was a bad friend to her. It was really difficult going through those 2 years of constant fighting with your best friend, the person whom you're supposed to love the most out of all your friends. But she was the kind of person that it was worth overcoming that tension for. I was so blessed that we were able to come from just tolerating one another to a place of genuine love. And my prayer for all of you today is that you may be strengthened in your inner being with the love of Christ that surpasses all knowledge, and that especially towards our brothers and sisters in Christ who may be a little bit different than us. Thank you.
It's always been funny to me how teenagers have this angsty ambition to run away from home. There's something youthful about craving independence and feeling like you could take on the whole world if your mom would just stop texting you freaking every 5 minutes, you know? I remember the time my sister ran away from home in June. It was a hot and muggy night a few years back. I was taking a nap in my room at the time when I heard some yelling and shuffling around downstairs. I came out to see what was going on, and I saw my sister standing there and crying, holding a suitcase full of clothes. The next 4 words that she said left me with endless nights of lost sleep and a few more years of dropping out of therapy. As she made her way outside and into a stranger's car, my parents and I stood in the driveway in disbelief. You see, my sister was dating another girl at the time, and she didn't feel like anybody could actually understand what she was going through. She hadn't always dated girls, but there was something about this particular relationship that offered her a kind of love and acceptance that she hadn't been able to find anywhere else. Now, I'm in no hurry to discuss any of the moral or theological implications of this subject, and frankly, I'd feel like a fool for trying to. But I do know that I built up an insurmountable amount of hate towards my sister at this time. I'd be ashamed to tell you some of the words that I use in order to make her feel less about herself. So fast forward to transferring to Biola University, the spring semester of 2012, just awaiting in anticipation for all the glorious things God had in store for me, but I didn't anticipate my first real friend that I would make on campus. Although I didn't go to much of the transfer meetings, sorry, Dr. Corey, I ended up attending one required safety meeting in Mayor's Auditorium. And so naturally, my introverted self made sure I was in safe isolation from anyone who could come over and ask me the cliches like, where are you from? What are you studying? How do you feel about predestination? The campus usual, you know? But this one kid had the nerve to come over and talk to me and start up a little conversation. We ended up talking for a while, and he later introduced his parents to my parents, and over the course of the next few months, we began to become closer friends. So there was a lot of late night conversations in the dorm room. It turns out he was living in the same dorm room as I was and in the same floor. We ate way too many Cheez-Its and gave a few of them to a parrot that we smuggled into his dorm room. Sorry, President Corey. But after that, he started opening up a little bit about his life, a little bit more about his family, and a little bit more about his sexual orientation. And as I sat there listening to story after story of horrific conversations he'd had with pastors and peers and endless sessions of reparative therapy, I began to realize that this might have been one of the only times that he got to talk without somebody telling him how to change. I realized how important something like this might have been for my sister. Because for so long, I sat in a place of judgment and hate, pointing out all of her imperfections instead of pointing her to Jesus, talking and talking and talking, instead of just sitting in silence, listening to her, empathizing with her, hearing her story, and sharing in her hurt. I gave my sister a call on the phone that night. I don't really remember a ton of what was said, to be honest, because most of it was through tears. But I had to tell her that I was sorry. I had to tell her that I was in the wrong. And I had to tell her that hating her for 5 whole years was the only sin that we would be talking about that night. And the next 4 words she said, they felt something like an anchor lifting from the depths of my soul. I forgive you, Tommy. I gave her a call a couple weeks ago, actually, to see if she'd be okay if I shared some of the things that we went through in our relationship. She was ecstatic, actually, and proceeded to tell me all the new things that she was learning about Jesus and all the new ways she was learning to accept his love. And it's crazy, really, when you think about it, because something occurred in those moments that brought more clarity for me that I probably could have received from some debate or collision of opinions on sexuality or any other point of contention, for that matter. In my attempt to imitate the character of Christ, to really figure out and try to see how that plays out in real life, I learned to sit back, to remain quiet as long as necessary, in order to listen to the stories of each and every person God had appointed me to love and to care for. I always thought that admitting I was wrong would be the biggest display of weakness for me. But I can't even begin to tell you the amount of strength and freedom it brought to those relationships. Thank you.
My story involves a collision of wheels. It begins in my senior year of college life at Georgetown University when I was trying to decide about going to graduate school. And so I put a fleece before the Lord. I said, Lord, if you want me to go to graduate school, you need to provide me funding, especially after 4 years at Georgetown University. And he did. I got 2 grants to go to American University for my PhD in anthropology. God was faithful. So I went through 3 years of coursework, and I was getting ready to do my field research, and I applied for grants from Fulbright and Wintergren and the Social Science Research Council and didn't get one. So I'm left thinking, God, what are you doing? Have you brought me this far to leave me? I was wondering, should I take out a loan for my field research? I knew I needed to live in South Africa for a year. How much money would that be? I had completed 3 years of coursework. Was I not supposed to get my dissertation? God, what are you doing? And so I remember one day I was walking around campus, and I heard such a sweet voice say, remember what I told you? I said I would provide for you. So I didn't take out a loan. Instead, I filled out a job application. And I actually got a job for the Academy for Educational Development, and I was working for the United States Agency for International Development. And they put me in charge of an evaluation of evaluations project. And what it entailed was all of these USAID branches had to do evaluations of their projects, submit them to USAID in order to get continued funding. And so I reviewed their reviews of their projects, going, okay, Lord, what is this? I didn't give up on my dissertation research. I applied again for grants a year later, and I got 2 grants, one from Fulbright and another from my university that paid for all of my dissertation research and for my course write-up. God was faithful. And it was so wonderful to see how he provided for me. And if that wasn't enough, it was only years later that I remember what I was thinking and how it has been such a help to me. Because one of the things that I do here at Biola University is lead the International Development Emphasis Minor in the Cook School of Intercultural Studies. And one of the classes I teach is project evaluation and assessment. And I didn't know back then, all those years ago, why I was looking through all of those evaluations and being able to understand how they were doing what they were doing. But now I know God had a plan all along that he was working out, that he wasn't saying no to me, he was saying, wait, I have something better for you. And so what I would say to encourage you is when things are happening in your life and they seem like setbacks, they can often be set-ups for a blessing that God has for you. We see in the immediate, he sees long-term. We are short-sighted, he sees the big picture. All we have to do is trust that he will do what he says he will do.
it was our first New Year's Eve as a couple. Invitations had been coming in, but we had set our expectations. We want to watch fireworks explode over the LA skyline from a lookout point in our neighborhood when the clock strikes 12.
Now, before we go on, we should probably clue you into a little bit about us.
I am a pretty direct communicator.
And I tend to be a bit more indirect. And as you can imagine, that might cause for some conflict in a relationship. This is the story about the first time that happened.
So the setting was New Year's Eve. Our friend Stephanie, who lives in La Mirada, invited us over for dinner at 6 o'clock to have dinner with her and her daughter. And she mentioned, I think I want to usher this New Year's in with a snore. So we were like, perfect. This gives us plenty of time to get back to LA in order to see the fireworks at midnight.
Now, conversations with Stephanie are some of our favorite. They're always robust, stimulating, and lengthy. And so we talked through dinner, we helped put her daughter to bed, and then we kept talking.
And talking.
And talking. Now, I'm the only one in the room with a watch on, and so like any sane, higher context person, right around 9:50, I say nothing.
I'm beginning to notice that Chase looks a little irritable, but I wasn't sure. Maybe the food from dinner wasn't sitting well. Maybe he needed a little bit more time before we went home. I'm not sure our relationship is quite to the level of a long car ride home on an upset stomach with the windows rolled up, if you catch my drift.
And somehow scooting to the edge of the couch and gritting my teeth and raising my eyebrows anytime Alicia looked my direction, I was supposed to communicate, hey, it's about that time when we talked about going, and so maybe we should think about getting out of here and not, would you pass the Tums? But she never picked up on that.
Around 10:45, Chase begins to noticeably withdraw. And this is a little bit upsetting, and I'm realizing, okay, there's something wrong here, there's something going on, it's not about the food, but it can't be about the time, because Stephanie's a direct communicator, and she would have told us when she wants to go to bed, so it can't be that. And to be honest, I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed, because he's acting a little rude.
And I might have been. But at 11:20, I decide to abruptly interrupt the conversation with, oh, look at the time, we should be going.
10 more minutes of goodbyes and hugs, and we were on the road.
Now, the conversation was terse as we drove down Rosecrans. We ramped our way up the 5 North, and we found out that traffic is just dense enough to make sure we're not going to get there on time.
In my perspective, it was more valuable to be with Stephanie in that moment and value her friendship.
And I felt that we betrayed our plans and overstayed our welcome, and frankly, I felt a little ignored.
So right as we were passing the 605, I realized just how upset Chase is. In fact, it's the most upset I've ever seen him since we've been together. And I realized, okay, we need to talk about this.
And so we start to unpack the evening.
What happened there?
Why didn't you know that?
Well, it was because...
Couldn't you see?
Well, did you see it this way?
But we fell silent again. And right around when the clock would have struck 12, I heard a sound. Are you crying? And when I saw the tears stream down Alicia's face, I exploded with laughter, because I have never, ever at this point seen Alicia cry, and she's seen me cry 4 times. I have been waiting for this moment. But thankfully,
I began to laugh too. And we laughed, and we laughed, and we laughed. We laughed past the Citadel outlets until the tension completely dissipated, and we sighed in relief.
And that's when our focus realigned. Despite the letdowns of the expectations and the miscommunication, sometimes you just gotta laugh instead of let frustration linger.
What we learned in that moment was when we have conflict with one another, we have to move towards each other. That we have to value each other more than the immediate hurt.
And so we showed up to the new year a hurried 10 minutes late. That's okay. We found out in our neighborhood, fireworks explode long past midnight.
And the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. But truth collides against all the lies of this world. Grace collides with hatred, with revenge. So the Word had to become flesh. He had to dwell amongst the Mairasi people on that dinosaur-looking island that's sitting up above Australia, that's shaped kind of like this, and we were living on the Adam's apple with the Mairasi people. And then we had a son. His name was Daniel. But Daniel was not the only Daniel in the village. There was also a crazy old man named Daniel Tavwani. He was mostly demon-possessed, but he was also a bit crazy, and we didn't really like our son Daniel calling him Javisa. That's your closest term in Mairasi. If you share names, you're automatically close. But do we want our son to be close with the guy that would wear a red loincloth, balance a lemon on his head, and another one under his armpit, playing his ukulele as they whirled and twirled and twirled all through this solemn Dutch Reformed service? But we missed the old guy when all of a sudden he disappeared. We kept asking, and no one knew where Daniel Tavwani was. Then July 8th, 1988, all of a sudden there was a faint cry. It was coming from the southern end of the village. We heard, Johnson, 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 eh! So we ran down to the ocean because right there was a boat coming in. And it's very rare that a boat comes in with an outboard motor. And there were 2 soldiers on that boat and a policeman. They were so scared to be in our village that had such a bad reputation that they just wanted to tell their story and get out of there. So they said, well, I know you've been wondering where Daniel Tavwani is. Well, there were 2 young men who thought he was getting too powerful as a shaman, and so they came in 6 weeks ago into his hut, and they dragged him out and put him into a canoe, and they took him out to sea and cut him up into little pieces and tied each piece to a rock and dropped it into the ocean, rinsed out the canoe, hid it on an island, and that's why you haven't seen Daniel Tavwani. And we're out of here. And Frederick Kamakaula, a young Christian, he stood up and he said, no way, dudes, you can't just drop a bombshell like that on us and leave us in inter-tribe warfare. He said, Daniel's daddy and I are going to run to the offended clan, 5K run across the swamp, go across the river, and we're going to calm them down and get them to come, and you guys have to meet us at the Balai Desa this evening. So we had our 5K run. We went running through the swamps and up over the limestone cliffs and down past the place where I had once had to jump over a death adder or a taipan while I was carrying a son on my shoulders. And we got down to the river, and there was one canoe. We got in that canoe and we paddled across. By God's Holy Spirit, he calmed them down. They had been sharpening their machetes. Every muscle was twitching. It was rage like I had never seen rage before, and I hope I never see it again. They were getting ready to pour into their canoes and come across. And Frederick Kamakaula said, you don't need to worry about speaking in Indonesian tonight. Daniel's daddy's going to interpret for you. They agreed to come. So I stood in the middle of this crazy crowd of people, interpreting as the chief warrior said, "Ja'anog Janginyos." We demand a peace exchange of a person. And God sent his son to be that peace price.
So I'm with a team of 16 people, and we're doing sort of the typical mission trip. We're going to South Africa. We're going to be working in some townships that have been impoverished, but we're also going to work at an academy with high school students who have come out of these townships. They're impressive kids, and they're living in a boarding school now, and they're preparing for university. We've had this partnership with this particular ministry for years. It's always gone really smooth. But as we head into our trip, we start getting news that there's violence in the townships that we typically would work in. And as we're flying out there, we start getting some stories about what's happening. We find out that one of the alumni who had recently graduated had gotten involved in the wrong crowd. He was murdered. His family members were murdered. The students at the academy that we were going to go visit, the students at the academy we were coming to minister to, were devastated. In addition, one of the students, the senior girls, one girl in particular had gotten into some trouble. In an attempt to protect her, the other girls were involved in lying and deception. And in doing that, they were expelled. We're finding this out as we're doing layovers and stops through Dubai and other places on our way to South Africa. It felt like the absolute worst time to possibly show up on someone's front door. It's like showing up at Christmas with presents and they're like, hey, we're getting divorced. And we're like, oh, so should we come back? You know, it just felt like so inappropriate. We're showing up with flannel graphs and someone got murdered. It was so bad. So we're trying to regroup. What we knew, we had a little bit of history with these kids at this academy. We knew that generally speaking, these senior girls were really good girls, but they had made a poor choice. We also discovered when we got there that we were no longer able to keep our plan for VBS. Originally, we would go into the township for 3 days, 3 hours at a time, do our little stuff, and then come back to the academy in a different location. The problem was the townships were too unsafe. They were too unstable. So now, instead of doing 9 hours of VBS, we've made a new plan. We're going to take these 25 kids, and we're going to bring them to us. So now we have them for 72 hours. We have 9 hours of plans. So in the course of bringing these kids out, we realized we're really going to need some help. And generally speaking, we would do an after-school program with the high school kids. And what we decided to do was grab some of these senior girls. They were just returning from their suspension. We grabbed these girls and we said, you know what, girls? We need your help. We got all these little kids here. There's a language barrier. So what we need you to do, you got about 15 minutes. We need you to teach them some songs. We need you to teach them some Bible stories, and we need you to teach them some games. We've got to do something to keep these kids active and entertained. The girls look at me with a blank stare. They were not super excited about this. They didn't really know me very well. But they took the task on, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. They were amazing. They were mature. They were fun. They had this thing in order. And so we asked them, would you be willing to do it again? They said yes. They did it the next day. They grabbed the senior boys, and it was such a neat experience. And as they wrapped up their time with these kids running their own VBS that we gave them 15 minutes to plan, they're spending hours with these kids doing an amazing job. They start dreaming about what it would look like for them to minister to these kids. What if we went into the townships? What if we started a school for these kids? The kids that they were ministering to earlier in the academy, high school students' lives, they were these kids. They could relate to them. So they start dreaming. We have some fun conversations. We go to dinner. It's our last night with the little kids. And the seniors come up to us and they say, hey, would you mind if we changed the program? Normally we would minister to the seniors. They said, would you mind if we changed the program? Can we do something for the little kids? And they took the initiative. We want to lead devotions. So we say, great, we'll see you in a couple hours. They show up. It was amazing. And this was the particular point in the time that we realized that out of the chaos, our plans changing, a murder, these kids being suspended, so much discouragement, so much tension, it seemed like the worst possible time for us to come. We're sitting in this time with these seniors leading these little kids, and we're realizing something is happening here that is really, really important. When they were ministering to these little kids, there was a connection that Americans could have never, ever had. These seniors were looking at these little kids with they had so much wisdom in them, so much insight into what these children were living in. They spoke scripture to them. They prayed over them in ways that we just could not have done. And the sweetest moment was they had us all circle up, and while they're leading this time, it's partly in their native language, Xhosa, and partly in English, they start singing a song. It starts off in Xhosa. We don't know what it is. Beautiful harmony. Just felt like a really deep, rich song, but just neat. Didn't know what it was. And as it goes on, we end up hearing, they transition into English, and the words are singing over these little children living in these just horrific townships with HIV, drugs, alcohol, murder. These children live in this. And the seniors are singing, you must never, never, never give up. You must never, never, never give up. And it was beautiful. And in the course of them singing it, that's a song, the verse in Zephaniah that says he sings over us. I felt like I'm watching that. They're singing over these children. They are blessing them. And what was so neat is when it was over, several of the older boys from 9 to 11 years old asked specifically for prayer. They accepted Christ. They asked to be baptized. These were kids that our church had ministered to for years. The local kids showed up, they dialed it in, they brought it home. So we're debriefing this with the seniors, and as we're doing that, they're telling us stories, they're doing some translation, they're very excited, they're on a high. And we just told them, we just saw God work through so powerfully. You guys are real ministers, you are amazing. And one of the senior boys stopped us and said, well, I don't know if you know this, but before you got here, we got in a lot of trouble. We had a lot of drama, and we had every privilege taken away from us except for God before you showed up. And the neatest thing was our team leader, Jared Gibo, who's gone for 4 years and knew these kids, looked the boy in the eye, and he goes, yeah, we know. We know. We know exactly what you did. And we knew that God was going to work in and through you to minister to these kids. And it was so important for these kids to know that Jesus said, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. These kids are orphans, these kids don't have good home lives, and they needed to be able to screw up, have God show up like he did for Peter after the denial, and say, you're mine. You're mine. You are my son. You are my daughter. I will always invite you to participate in bringing life. So for us, the collision, we walk into a situation with deception and murder and discouragement and grief, and we walk out of a situation and there is life and love and hope and just restored relationship. It was such a great experience. God is so good.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.